You are not going to want to miss this show. Today we sit down with Rob Cressy of Bacon Sports. We talk about sports marketing. We talk about business. He talks about how important energy is and much, much more.
This is crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Everywhere you turn, it's the same old sports talk, the same headlines, the same news, and the same boring information. This podcast is here to change all of that. We bring you hot sports takes, winning sports betting strategy and picks, reliable gaming industry news, and breaking interviews with some of the biggest names in sports business. My name is Ryan Knuppel, and welcome to the Noop Sports Show. All right, welcome to another edition of the Noop Sports Show. My name is Ryan Knuppel. I'm the host here with you each and every time. Man, I got a very special guest, one of the best in the business here with me today. Rob Cressy's with me of Bacon Sports. Rob, are you with me?
I am here. I am super excited. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, very excited to have you. Hey, we're not only doing audio with this one, we're doing a little video. So we're taking this to the next level. This is our first video interview, Rob. So you should feel very special that you're a pioneer in our video space. So
I feel
congrats.
honored.
Well, thanks for being here. I definitely appreciate it, Rob. One thing that really stood, I'm going to get into your background here in a second. We'll talk a lot about what you're doing. But before I get started, I just wanted to tell the audience, why I have Rob on here and why we connected so much. I connected with Rob maybe a few weeks ago, but immediately when I looked at Rob's profile and kind of went through some of the background that he had, I was immediately connected to what you do. I mean, you and I think are like kindred spirits in the online entrepreneurial world. I mean, some of the stuff I was reading that you put out in terms of articles are exactly what I feel in my heart. I was reading one of your articles about energy and how your 2019 word was energy, and that was spot on. So Rob's in the content world, does a lot of things similar to what we're doing, but he's doing them from a very engaging perspective. So I'm gonna let Rob talk a little bit about what Bacon Sports is, what he does, and but I just wanted to give that quick background before we got started here.
I appreciate the kind words. And as we're heading up on the end of the year right now, I'll give one little nugget to get this party started is think about what your one word of the year will be. And there's a reason for this. And on my journey, and the reason why I do what I do at Bacon Sports is I'm very transparent about everything. I know in order for me to be successful, to work in sports, to be creative, to do what I love, that I'm going to have to do things that other people aren't willing to do. And I've also realized that the most important thing is, all right, what can you control? And I realize I can control two things. I can control what I learn, so my own personal development. And then number two, I can control my mindset, how I react to things. So when looking at what is your word of the year with energy, it's all about intention. So by setting it and saying, all right, energy is going to be my word of the day. Well, how in the world does that manifest itself? Well, every single day when I get my 10X planner and I plan my day, what word do I write down? Energy. And imagine the difference in saying and writing energy 365 times over the course of a year and not doing it. Which person do you think is more likely to have more energy? And remember, energy is transferable, and I'm team good vibes. So by setting this, I can make my life better as well as the people who are part of my community.
That's amazing. That's amazing, man. It's hilarious because I coach a varsity basketball team here in Orlando, Florida. I'm an assistant coach, and our theme for the year, so with our team, we've started reading the Energy Bus. It's a book called The Energy Bus, and our whole theme for the entire year has been about creating our own energy as a team, as players. And exactly like you said, we've been preaching to these young high school boys the way they react to things and the way that they handle situations that come upon them is so important, not only on the basketball court, but in life as they get older, into the business world, into the entrepreneurial world, whatever they're going to do. Energy is and it's funny because we started studying this and it's like, man, right up my alley. And I saw your article and thought, man, this is just perfect. So I loved what you just said there about energy.
Thank you. And certainly on the basketball court, because the basketball has energy. And it's something that Jalen Rose talks about all the time on his podcast. Because if you think about ISO basketball, one guy, James Harden or something, he's just shaking, bacon, boom, takes it down to 3 seconds and jams up a three, as opposed to what we were seeing when the Warriors were at their peak, where it's like, boom, 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 that ball's got energy. Everybody else is feeling it. It's a very simple thing for you to say, hey, let me teach you energy on the basketball court, but then off of it, you've got team chemistry. How does that happen? You got energy between the players. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh, all right. Then you say to the classroom, well, you're going to have some energy. You're going to be intentional about what you're doing. So I love what you're doing.
Awesome. Well, cool, Rob. I love how you mixed in that shaken bacon there. That was a little sneaky. You got the bacon in there in the middle of the sentence, but
of course.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, tell us a little bit about Bacon Sports. Tell us about more from a business side. What about your company? Maybe about how you got started, about what you guys are up to these days.
Yeah, for sure. So I started Bacon Sports 7 years ago. My background was in digital advertising sales, and I was great at it. But here's the thing. I didn't wake up every day looking forward to slinging banner ads and text links. You can be great at something and not love doing it. And for as long as I can remember, I've always been a writer and a creator. So even when I was out of college, had no job, I created my own sports blogs, and I would do fantasy sports stuff for free. And for me, as I went from crappy job to crappy job, I continually just had this dream of, man, could you imagine waking up one day and just creating sports content for a living? And finally, I got to a point where I said, listen, I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't give it a shot at making my dreams happen. I know that I belong because I looked at the content that was being created, and it was very copy-paste, insert what's on Deadspin or Bleacher. It was very much the aggregation model. And I was like, I can create better original content than this. So that's when I decided to quit my job and go all in at making my dreams happen. And I started Bacon Sports as a original sports comedy blog. So we were creating original sports content. So we created thousands of articles, videos, podcasts, social media marketing, and we got really good at building a community. So we threw some events to engage our audience that we built online, offline. And through this all, my background, remember, was in advertising sales. So I knew how to monetize websites. But going into it with that knowledge, I knew that was not the way to make money with what I wanted to do. The challenge being, and it has certainly manifested itself over the last 7 years and currently right now, is the media industry on the publishing side has gone in the wrong direction when it comes to how do you monetize a media company. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to build a media company that is not built on an advertising supported model, which doesn't exist. So the problem became, how do you monetize if you're not monetizing your page views? And what slowly started to evolve was, I thought, all right, well, if I'm not going to make money off of my own page views, who could I potentially create content for that needs this? And a little light bulb went off in my head. And I've got a background in marketing. That's what my degree was in college. And I was like, well, brands, they don't need to monetize via banner revenue because they're selling widgets or insert whatever. And guess what they're traditionally not good at? Marketing to their fans. How do I know? Because I'm on the receiving end of this. So we started to become a creative agency for brands that wanted to market to and engage sports fans. It just so happens, Ryan, how in the world do you market to someone right now? Podcast, video, live stream, social media marketing, the exact same way that we had built our brand for at the time 3 years. So we took all of the ways that we had built our brand and engaged the community and said, instead of just doing this for ourselves, we're going to offer this service to brands that want to engage sports fans.
Man, that's amazing. Amazing backstory there. And I mean, it looks like it's been working. I mean, some of the brands that I see, you working with are major brands, or have worked with in the past, Buffalo Wild Wings, NASCAR. I mean, you can go down a whole list, I'm sure, of names, and out on, I think, baconsports.com, there's a whole list of brands that you work with. But tell us a little bit about how it is working with some of those major brands. I mean, I'm sure it's a little different than working with our regular small website that I put together, right? I mean, this is a different beast that you're working with here.
So it's interesting because if you were to look at how do I land clients, there is no specific formula other than action. So the NASCAR one is probably one of the most unique sales I've ever done in my entire life. And I'll tell you how I did it. You know what I did? I got NASCAR to sponsor my bachelor party. That's right. So I'm sitting there, and it's like, this is, I don't know, a few years ago, and we've gone to Vegas a bunch of times, and it's like, all right, if you're not just going to go and buy bottles at a club for your bachelor party, what are you going to do? And I was like, I want this to be something that's interactive, unique, and different. And it just so happens at the time, and this was sort of when the Bacon Sports publishing was still going very strong. And someone from NASCAR's agency had reached out to me a few months prior. They had a microsite that they were creating. So they were looking for influencers to create NASCAR-related content, of which would live on this website that NASCAR would be promoting. And at first, I was like, this doesn't really interest me because we don't create NASCAR content. That's not our jam. That being said, I've gone to a NASCAR race before, and it is freaking awesome. It is a ton of fun.
Talk about
and
energy.
I also, right, totally energy. I also knew that my friends would never go to a NASCAR race, but if they did, they would love it. And that became my hook. So I reached back out to the agency, and I was like, listen, I've got this idea. I want NASCAR to sponsor my bachelor party. And what I'm going to do is we're going to have 15 people who are sports fans that would be considered the general population, someone NASCAR would love to have as their audience. And what we're going to do, we're going to show how fun and relatable NASCAR is by documenting our entire experience at the Coca-Cola 600 in Charlotte. And guess what? They said yes. And just like that, so my bachelor party is down there, and we got access to pit road. We drove in the pace car before the race. It was absolutely freaking ridiculous. And through that, I ended up getting credentialed by NASCAR to cover NASCAR when they came up to Chicago. They're like, hey, do you want? And I'm like, of course I'll create NASCAR content. Yeah. So it was a very non-traditional way, but here's the thing. I had this vision and dream, and I pitched it. And there's one of the quotes and mantras that I live by. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. So how do you land NASCAR? You ask them to sponsor your bachelor party.
Yeah. I think that's an amazing story, man. I mean, props to you for being able to pull that off. And I mean, that just shows engaging content can go a long way. And I think also, you know, the way you stated that if you don't act on something, if you don't take action, it's never going to happen. And going back to kind of the word of the year, I mean, I'm very similar where I'm always, you know, throwing around this stuff, these words, what's my theme this year? What am I going to focus on? And if anything, the word I worked on this year myself was action. I mean, action, act, because you can sit there and you can learn, you can consume, you can take in information all day long. I mean, there's podcasts, and it's funny because we're delivering a lot of that information. So I'm not telling you not to listen to our stuff and consume our stuff, but at some point you got to take what you're learning and you have to act on it and just start doing. Even if you're going to do it wrong, right? You may do it wrong. You are going to do it wrong, but you got to do it because you're never going to learn. You're never going to grow. You're never going to get to the right spot if you don't just start acting. So I love that.
Well, you nailed that 100%. And that's my philosophy for everything that I do. So you and I, as creators, I'm going to put out content that is of value to others. So here's the nuggets of wisdom that I've learned along my journey that I'm going to share with you. When I listen and learn something and take this away, this is a very important thing. You need to implement at the speed of instruction. So what this means is when you learn something, you hear something on either of our podcasts, you need to now implement this the very first time that you hear that, because now all of a sudden you become like Neo in the Matrix who can learn judo. So it's like, boom. So now you're looking out for these little nuggets of wisdom. You're like, boom, that's good. Implement this into my life. And when we as the creators can put that out there to the people, I believe that's how good positive energy happens and good things will come to us from it.
Absolutely. Man, I hope all you listeners are enjoying this. This is going to probably go down as one of my favorite episodes. So I hope everybody enjoys this. Let's switch gears a little bit. So I know you're heavily into the sports betting industry. You're really enjoying what's all going on here in the United States with sports betting. Give us a little insight, maybe to the location you live or some location that you are, maybe passionate about. I don't know if that's New York, if that's Illinois, what it is, but give us a little insight of what's happening in the sports betting space, where you think it might go, and maybe one of Rob Cressy's Bacon Sports predictions of where we're going with all this madness.
So I'm incredibly bullish for obvious reasons about the sports betting landscape. It's something that patience is going to need to be a word for the entire industry. And also, I think patience is something that we as consumers need to be aware of. And a simple way to think of it is even look at cryptocurrency and the volatility of things, or the daily fantasy sports industry. Maybe that's the better one. With daily fantasy, it was we got flooded into the market, and then all of a sudden DraftKings and FanDuel stopped spending money, and the media is like, oh my God, what's going on to the daily fantasy industry? And all that really was a big ramp up and then sort of a plateau and maybe a minor speed bump while regulations are happening. So I think the same is going to happen with sports betting. It's going to take some time to be regulated across the United States. You'll hear the media say a lot of both positive, but probably more negative about what's not happening. But don't really listen to that, because in the infancy of any industry like this, is certainly something that's regulated. It takes time. One, a lot of people are going to want to get paid. So that's probably why it's going to take the most amount of time. But after that, just like any other business, they're going to have to learn. And for me, what I believe the biggest opportunity is on my end is on the marketing side of things. And I really think it's going to be the ability for brands all the way up at the operator level. So whether it's DraftKings, FanDuel, the William Hills of the world, one step below the content level. So the covers.com, the action networks, the roto grinders of the world. And then the level below that will be the brands. So Buffalo Wild Wings is putting in terminals in their restaurants. So if you just take the spider web of that and it says, all right, if Buffalo Wild Wings is going to be putting sports betting in their restaurants, well, who else would want to get a piece of that action? And then you're like, well, I'm sure the alcohol industry is going to want a piece of this. And then you're like, well, what else? Then you apparel. And then you can draw out this spider web map of who's going to need to or want to engage sports bettors. But back to the reason why I created Bacon Sports. What are brands going to have a hard time doing? Authentically speaking sports betting to the audience. Because guess what? We can smell bullshit a mile away. You can't just say, oh, who's going to win this game? Like, you need to be able to drop minus 110 or VIG or parlay or teaser, because that's the way that we speak. Yeah. So I think, and I really think this is going to be a major problem for the larger brands, because if you think on the largest level, it's going to be a land grab for customer acquisition. So the DraftKings and the FanDuels and the PointsBet and the William Hills, the operators, they're going to say, what can we do to get people to sign up and place bets with us? The challenge being, that's very much a commodity. If I can choose any of them, what really differentiates one from another, right? It's going to be the story that they tell. So everyone's going to have, reduced juice bonuses, or we'll give you this. Well, guess what? Welcome to the rest of our life where everything becomes Black Friday. It's 20% off this. So now, and certainly this speaks to the way that my marketing philosophy is what is the story you're going to tell, and how are you going to engage the fans? And the way that you do that is by building a community. So really, the brand should be thinking very similar to how Barstool Sports operates. Irregardless of what we think of Barstool, you know what they do great? They've built a community where people care. Well, now what's going to get us to care about any of these brands? Well, now you've got to speak to us like you and I are jamming right now.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. Hey, I know you're on a couple podcasts. You host a couple podcasts. What shows do you host right now? I saw a whole list of ones that you've been on that you're hosting. What are some places that people can listen to you? Because I guarantee my listeners are going to ask, hey, where can I listen to more of Rob? Where can they listen to you at?
So if you like sports betting, check out the Sharp 600. It's a podcast I do for covers.com. It's twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I host a podcast called the Sports Marketing Huddle, which takes a look at a combination of sports marketing, entrepreneurship, and personal development. And I also host a podcast called the Game Day Playbook. which is for a company called Fan Food, which does mobile in-stadium food ordering. So like Grubhub or DoorDash, except for when you go to a football game. And that is about the intersection of sports technology and fan engagement.
Cool, man. Well, I'll put all those links in the show notes as well, and we'll put them all out there for you. So what else? So give us, give the listeners, I guess, one, because it sounds like you have such a great business mind. I mean, put aside the sports, put aside the sports betting. I'm more intrigued with your business mind, because it's really right up the same thought process and right in my alley. And so give us another business tip. I mean, maybe for the entrepreneur startup company out there, because I think a lot of the listeners on this are probably trying to get into the sports business space, maybe starting up some project in the sports betting space, and maybe could use a little motivation or business advice. So what's one tip that maybe off the top of your head that we haven't talked about that you could give aspiring business owners, or just business owners that need to improve or looking to improve?
Yeah, there's a book that I read that I really enjoyed called The Power of One, the Kaizen Way. And it boils down to this: improvement can be done with one small action, no matter how big or small. So when on any journey or business experience, you don't have to figure the entire thing out. But what I need you to do is to take one action, because Ryan, I think if we both look at ourselves, and we're all fallible of this, is how many times do we overthink things, or we let fear get in the way, and that causes inaction. And inaction is the thing that's going to cause your business or your personal brand to not grow. But if we take the inverse of that and you say, all right, well, what can we do about this? So imagine fitness. You're not going to the gym and you're like, oh, you know what? Some people would say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sign up for a marathon. If you're not going to the gym, signing up for the marathon is a pretty rash decision. But what I would recommend is I would say, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to set a timer on your phone for 1 minute and just do jumping jacks and air squats. Can you do that for 1 minute? Yeah, I can do that. Boom, you get that done. You know why that's important? Because one action builds momentum. And that's what you're really trying to do, because the difference between inactivity and action and momentum is only the smallest amount. And then once you start getting that, boom, good things start to happen. So now as an owner, start to think about all areas of your life, and you say, what is one small step or one small action I could take? You want to create a podcast? Boom, take one step in order to do that. You want to go be better at fitness? Take one small step. You want to think about starting a business? Read one article and commit to doing that day after day. So the next thing would be consistency. Once you've decided I'm going to take one small action, now rinse and repeat this day after day after day, because you have to have a long-term mindset about this. You're not going to become super wealthy and live the life of your dreams overnight. So you need to have this long-term mindset that, you know what, I'm all in. And one thing that someone told me is the concept of burning the boats. Imagine being on an island and there is an army that you need to fight against. The best way that you're going to win that battle is by burning the boats. And you go, listen, we're all in on this. We either win this bad boy or we're dead. So guess what? The same mindset for entrepreneurship is one that I took. And it's an extremely uncomfortable one.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly when you're not in a position of what you believe is strength. But it is something that if you don't have in the back of your mind, like for me, there was no plan B. When I went all in on this journey, it wasn't like, yeah, but I'll fall back on, because my mom would always be like, Rob, you made such good money selling digital advertising. Wouldn't you want to do that? And I'm like, Mom, that life is gone for me. So burn the boats, commit to yourself and your dreams, and go all in. Take small actions consistently.
Great advice. Great advice. Loving it. Loving it. Loving it. So we're going to wrap this up here fairly soon. I know we don't have all day. We're busy entrepreneurs. You got a lot going on in your business. But one other thing. Tell me a little bit about the future of Bacon Sports. So I know, we know what you do. We know, you're kind of what's going on with you guys. But what's the future? Is there anything breaking? Anything you're looking at growing into? Tell us a little bit about the future.
Yeah, I'm super excited about the future because I haven't even begun where this bad boy is going to be. I mean, I'm 7 years in, so in terms of burning the boats and long-term mindset, we're just in the first inning of this. So what really has my mind right now is productizing what I do. One of the challenges of my business is I never set out to create what would look like an agency. It just so happens that what I created has the services of an agency. And clients, it can be very cyclical. For example, I had a client that deals with baseball. When the baseball season ended, the campaign ended. So there's no right or wrong with it. That is what it is. But then the revenue goes away and you're like, man, I wish there was something that smoothed things out a little bit more. At the same time, I'm really making an emphasis to be more helpful. And as we're sharing nuggets of wisdom on this podcast, I want to take things like this and put them into easily digestible resources that people can learn from. So online education is going to be a gigantic part of what you see moving forward from Bacon Sports. So I've created an online video course for how to easily launch a podcast. I created an online video course on how to create a written social media and content strategy. So now I'm going to start taking the things that have helped me get to this point in the journey. And remember, at one point, I had no skill set in this. I didn't know how to podcast, video, host, social media marketing, events, apparel, any of it. So if you say Rob had some sort of advantage, no. I started at zero and taught myself all of this. And that is the key. I want to take what I've learned for how I've built this path and give people the opportunity to say, listen, if you want to learn how I've done things to build your own life of your dreams, here's the ways that we can do so. So that's one, is online education. And through that, we'll build a thriving community of like-minded people like us that say, hey, we're on these paths to build the life of our dreams. What are the ways that we can support each other? So how can we learn and how can we build community? And then the next thing that's on my mind is building what I'm going to call the Bacon Sports Man Cave Studio. So building out a space that is full-blown content creation capabilities. So podcast, video, and live streaming. And the reason for this is actually scratching my own itch, and you'll relate to this because of what you're doing at this given moment, is when I look in Chicago right now, if you said, you know what, I don't have any podcasting or video equipment, but I would like to create a video podcast for my company, where do I go? So really, when I looked at the marketplace, the answer was zero, this doesn't exist, all the way up to Harpo Studios, which is what Oprah's studio was. And something like that's going to cost $500 to $1,000 an hour.
Sure.
Well, that doesn't make sense to me because it's not that hard and it's not that expensive to create a studio. So I want to create it where all of a sudden it's like, oh, you need a producer? Well, congratulations. This is what we do for a living. So you create this media studio, and inside of it, there's going to be TVs with games everywhere, and it's going to be a creative space, and it's going to be a space for performance. Because as I also look at the co-working industry, I believe it's broken because I've worked out of WeWork and every co-working space in Chicago. And you know what they all say? We're about creatives and we're about community. But guess what? I'm someone who is a creative who builds community. And I know that they are neither one of those things because I cannot shoot a podcast or a video in any of those spaces because they don't have the equipment. And then when it comes to the community side of things, I go there and I plug in and everyone just has their headphones on sitting there and no one is talking. So to me, that is not a community.
No.
So what I'm going to do is bring together sports fans and give them the ability to use the studios if they want and create a community for performance. So if you want to have open mic nights, or you want to have live podcasts and videos, you want to work on things like this, I want to create a hub for all that.
Wow. Amazing, man.
Boom,
amazing.
shakalaka.
Boom. Yeah, I mean, that's amazing, dude. And it's like, again, I'm just going to keep saying it because, I mean, I really feel a business connection to what you guys are doing at Bacon Sports. You know, we created Noob Sports out of the same Noob Sports, Noob Solutions, out of the exact same mindset that you have here. And I know some of the listeners are probably looking at me and thinking, wait, isn't bacon sports kind of like competition to Noob Solutions or Noob Sports? And my mindset on that is so different than some people in business. And I wouldn't have had you on if I looked at it as competition. I look at it as we can all help each other grow in business. There's so much business to be had in this world. And if we work more together than against each other, we can all dominate. We can all win in this space. I think there's so much room for everybody to win. And so just connecting with you, I think after hearing what your future is and some things that you're doing, without going into much detail here, we need to talk, because I know there's some things we can collaborate on. We can work together, and two heads will be better than one on some of this stuff. So I really think we have some room to work together in the future.
100%. And you know, and I think this is an important point that's always been part of my mindset. When someone asked me in a video interview, Rob, who's your biggest competition? You know what the answer is? Myself. I'm not worried about anybody else. Like, that's the dumbest thing in the world. With all of the things you have to do to be successful, to run a business, to give even a second of thought for what anybody else is doing and how that might be cutting me down. No way, because it's your own limitations. It's your own mindset. It's your own action, because you have to build it and create it. Sure, you get to a point where you're a $500 million company. We'll cross that path when you get there. And yes, Ryan, I'm very much looking forward to us continuing that conversation, because let this be an example of how business is done now. This is why you create a podcast, because now, one, you and I get to connect, have another conversation, and now your listeners and my audience get to hear this. And guess what? Someone in either of our networks could say, I dig what Ryan's doing. I dig what Rob's doing. Who knows? Now, all of a sudden, there could be 3 or 4 of us doing business together, all because of this episode.
Beautiful. Beautiful, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I won't keep you much longer here for sake of time, but let my listeners know, where can they get a hold of you? I know you're on Instagram. I know you're on Twitter. You're on LinkedIn. Actually, that's a quick question I had for you. Do you have another minute?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Real quick question. So you're everywhere. Your Twitter, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, your podcasting, your video, and how do you manage that? Because I'm similar in that concept, but tell people how you manage that, because a lot of people can't even keep up with one social media platform, let alone 7. What's a tip of balancing all of that and just keeping up?
Remember, Kaizen, one small step, right? So instead of saying, oh my God, this sea of social media, there's so many things that I have to do. If I were to say, hey, Ryan, your goal today is to create one LinkedIn post. Do you think you can do it? And you'd be like, sure. I'll be like, all right, write that down in your planner. And then I'm like, hey man, you also trying to do something on Twitter? And you're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, how about you do one Twitter post too? And you're like, I could do that.
Easy.
And then I'm like, Ryan, you want to do something on Instagram? And you're like, yeah, I would. How about one thing? But here's the thing. That doesn't mean the content that you create can't be similar on all of them. I'm not recommending you taking every one of your platforms and posting the same thing at the same time. Key difference. The key is if you spread it out. So I actually use a social media automation tool called Sprout Social that allows me to schedule things. Well, why is this important? Because of organic reach. On any given platform, your audience is only going to see a small percentage of what you do. So think of it this way. I'll give you a little mindset. If you were to post something on LinkedIn at 8 a.m. and then on Twitter at 10 a.m. and then at Instagram at noon and then Facebook at 2, all of a sudden you've spaced your stuff out to your different audiences at different times there. And then I would also say, think about the way you create content differently. I post numerous times a day to all of the platforms. Well, how do you do it? Here's simple. Every day I have a quote of the day that sort of primes me and gets me ready for what I do. Well, I post that on all my social media platforms. Well, why would I do that? Because it's very simple to throw positive vibes out there.
Yeah.
So immediately after this, I'm going to do my morning routine. Boom, quote of the day. It's something I do for myself. But if I can share it with others, guess what? I get engagement on that stuff. So boom, there's a very simple thing. And then it's like, oh, I'm on this podcast with Ryan. You send me the link to this. I'm now going to post it on there. So now there's 2 simple things. So really it's about strategy. That's the simplest thing. When you don't know the blueprint for what to do, it's difficult. You wouldn't build a house without having a blueprint. So why would you run your social media without having a strategy for how you can execute it? Because remember, we spend so much time in our heads thinking about taking action, not taking the action. So if you can say, if I have the roadmap where Ryan goes, one post, check, do it all, boom, that's how you get it done.
That's it. Sounds like you're a student of some very influential marketers. I already heard the 10X planner, Grant Cardone. I hear a little bit of Gary V in there, just some concepts that some of those guys teach. So good stuff, man.
Of course, I'm a student of the game of things. I'll leave you with this. The number one thing that you can do to become successful is find a love of reading. I read for 30 minutes first thing in the morning every single day for the last 7 years. You know why that is? Because every day my goal is to make today better than yesterday. Yeah. I know that if I have learned by reading, then today is automatically better than yesterday. But Rob, I don't have time to read. You know when you always have time? First thing in the morning. Rob, but I've got to go to work and I got kids and stuff. Wake up 30 minutes earlier. Oh my God, but I'm not a morning person. All right. Do you want to live the life of your dreams and be successful, or do you want to be a sheep like everybody else?
Exactly. Cool, man. Great stuff. So back to it. Where can we find you? Give us some of your handles. I'm assuming it's pretty simple to find you, but where can we find you?
You can hit me up on all social media platforms at Rob Cressy. You can also check out baconsports.com, or if you want to get down and jam, hit me up, rob@baconsports.com.
All right, buddy, man. Super impressive interview here. I know everybody on this is going to love it. I'm so glad we got a video. I am so jealous of your background that's going to be number one task. My one task, finish my studio and get something sweet behind me, because right now I'm looking at this board and it's bugging me. I need something like baseball cards behind me like you guys. So congrats on all the success, man. I thank you for being here. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan. I really enjoyed this.
All right, buddy. Take care. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Noob Sports Show. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing to our iTunes channel today. Plus, visit us at noobsports.com for more picks, previews, strategy, and news. That's knupsports.com.